What's up, everybody? Just wanted to give you a kind of quick and dirty, that's kind of a lie, it's going to probably be a long video, intro to After Effects and motion design. All right, so if this is your first time ever opening After Effects, I know it can be a little intimidating, but hopefully it still feels pretty familiar. There's kind of some main areas to take a look at. One is this toolbar up here. This has a lot of our main tools that we'll be using. Another panel that's really important is on the left side here. That's the project panel. This contains all of our assets for whatever project we're working on. So you can import Illustrator files, Photoshop files, video files, music files, so MP3s, WAV, whatever audio formats, sound effects, all that stuff. Everything ends up in this kind of assets panel over here. This is our timeline down here. And so we're going to be looking at this quite frequently. So you're going to see these are all your layers on the left. So these are these assets being used in time. And you can see that this is our playhead. So as this moves through time, we're going to see a little animation happen that I've already built, and we're going to walk through here in just a minute. But if you scrub through, you can kind of play around with that, and you're going to see over here, there is the time code. So this is actually 1 second, 4 frames into the video right now. Now, if we want to just play this, sometimes this is collapsed, but this preview panel over here is really important. When you're ready to play a video, you just hit play. And then it just loops, and it kind of pre-renders everything. So it kind of makes it as it goes, and you're going to see this green line when everything is good. As your projects get more and more complex, it's going to take a little bit longer. It might not play as clearly. But for now, this is what we're doing. Another thing that we'll take a look at is you can actually, if you wanted to just look at a certain part of an animation, you can click and drag these handles down. And then if you put your playhead in between there, it'll loop just that section. So if we're really focusing in on one part of the animation and we don't want to wait for the whole thing, we can just do that. So I'm just hitting stop. I'm going to move these back out. All right. So I think the best way to learn this stuff is just to jump in. So we've got our Illustrator file, all right, and so I'm going to show you guys kind of how this thing started. Now, I came up with the idea for this. I did some concepting. I storyboarded it out, so I knew what I was going into. So I designed this here first, and then I kind of thought about how I wanted to animate this verb. So I was like, okay, form. We're just going to have all the kind of shapes just kind of form, right? We're using motion to tell a story about the word. So you're seeing I got another one down here, but we're going to focus on form today. So in Illustrator, when you guys are working, the most common size that we're going to be working is 1920 pixels by 1080. Okay, so 1920 by 1080 is HD video size. There's a bunch of other sizes we can go up or down. That's just the most common size right now, so that's how we're going to work. So this file is set up at 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, all right? And what's cool about this is that anything that you have on a layer individually, you can move, okay, or animate. So I've got my file set up, and you guys can take a look at this. I've got texture on top. I've got everything labeled nicely, organized, so that I know when I go into After Effects, I can move this stuff around. All right, so each element that I want to move is on its own layer. Okay, so if I wanted if I want to animate each one of these lines individually, they each have to be on their own layer. If I wanted to move them as a group, I could keep them all on the same layer. That'd be fine. So, all right, so this is Illustrator. I'm going to bounce back over to After Effects. Now, I'm gonna, let's close out of this. So I just want to give you guys a quick little demo here. And so with After Effects, you can only have one project open at a time. So I'm going to close this. That just closed. You got to do close project. That closed our composition. Close project, and I'm just going to hit save just so I have this. Okay, so when you open up After Effects and you just want to start a new project, you just go to File, New Project. Okay. So we have an untitled project right now, and so we have nothing in it. Now, After Effects always deals in compositions. Now, compositions are like mini movies, okay? And you can have a bunch of compositions. It's kind of like almost like a smart object in Photoshop. It's something that you can kind of, this is how we're gonna make our little videos, okay? So we're gonna make a new composition. And this is just to show you guys, we're gonna be working, like I said, 1920 by 1080. This preset, you can see here, we're going to work at 24 frames per second. So every second that goes by, there's going to be 24 basically still frames. That's our frame rate. Depending on how you're working, you know, for TV and stuff, it's 29.97. 24 is just, that's how we're going to work right now. I don't want to get into too much of the details about that. So 24 frames a second it is. And we're going to just kind of use these defaults. The duration you can set to whatever. I think it defaults to 30 usually, but we're just going to do a short little animation. So this is only going to be 3 seconds long. So this is a number that you can change. So this is frames, seconds, minutes, and then hours. We don't want to make any hour-long videos right now. So 3 seconds. You can change the background color if you want. We're just going to leave it black because that's not going to matter. So I'm going to hit OK. All right. Now I just want to explain the principles of what's going on here. So before we import anything, I just want to show you guys this timeline stuff. All right, because I know this is kind of new. So I'm just going to take my ellipse tool and I'm going to switch the fill to like red so we can see it. And I'm just going to draw a little circle. Okay, so this should feel pretty familiar. This is just like Illustrator, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pick my move tool. And so, you know, we can take this element and pick it up and move it around, okay? Just like we would any other program. But what After Effects is all about is keyframes, okay? So we're going to hit the transform little caret thing over here. And you're going to see some options. Now, this is stuff that you're going to be seeing all the time, okay? So we're going to see anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. All right, these are really, really important, okay? So position means the position. You can see when I click and drag this around, see that number changes, okay? Scale, pretty much what you think, right? Bigger, smaller. Rotation. It's rotating, and go back to 0. Opacity, right? So transparency, all that good stuff. Now this anchor point is something that we want to have, you know, in the middle of our circle. So you can either move this thing around. I mean, it's actually moving this, but it's moving that. I know it's kind of weird. How I like to move the anchor point is using the pan behind tool. Okay, so you can click the pan behind tool and move this around, and you're going to see it's automatically updating the anchor point numbers and the position numbers based on what I'm doing here. But there's no visual changes over here. It's kind of weird, but that's how we do it. Okay, so you can kind of guesstimate, or if you hold Command while you're doing it, it gives you little snap points. So if I let go right there, now I know it's perfectly in the center. Okay. So now, like if I rotate, we wouldn't see anything because, you know, it shows the box rotating, but it's not really doing anything. Anyways. Okay, so we got our anchor point set up. We've got, you know, we're just going to pretend like we want to move this. Oops, sorry. Undo that. We're going to want to move this across the screen. We're going to go from one point to the other. Okay. So how we do that is using these little stopwatch icons. Okay. So down here, you're going to click that stopwatch icon and you're going to see that it automatically added a keyframe down here. All right. So with animation, we need to determine our timing. Okay, so we're going to say we want this to happen in 1 second to go from one side of the screen to the other. So we've got to move our playhead so that we can tell it where we want it to be next. Okay, so you can either just click and drag, like click and move this where we want it to move. I want it to move straight across, so I'm just going to hold Shift. All right. And you're going to see that it automatically added a keyframe. Okay, so it knows that we want it to move from here to here in over 1 second. Now, if we want to change this, if we want it to be only take a half second, we could take our keyframe and just click and move it around. Now, play around with this. I mean, you can, anytime you move your playhead and you move this around, it's gonna start moving this around. All right, so anywhere that we move our playhead, we're giving it different points in time to be. All right, and so now we can hit play and look at our amazing animation. All right, I mean, people used to have to draw out each single frame. After Effects pretty much just does the math for you and figures out how many steps it takes to get from there to there. All right. Now we're going to get into some different kinds of motion stuff later, as far as fine-tuning the spacing of these elements so that we can control, we can really finesse the movement. All right. Right now, it's just moving at the same constant speed no matter what. So we're going to end up doing that later, but for now, this is the basic principles. And you can do more than one at a time. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these other keyframes over here. So you can just click and drag and delete stuff if you need to. You can have more than one property going on at the same time. I'm going to pretend like I want this to fade in as it's going across the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the keyframe on opacity. And I'm going to move my playhead back to the beginning. And you can also click and drag these numbers to change things. Okay, so I'm just clicking and dragging, or you can click on it and type in a specific number if you want to. So now when I hit play, it fades in and goes to the right. Okay. They don't have to line up. Let's say I want the fade to happen sooner. I can click that keyframe in. And let's say I want, yep, so on the 8th frame, I want that to happen sooner so we see more of the animation. So I'm just gonna hit play. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So that's the kind of basics, right? So anytime that you move your playhead and you make a change, it's gonna add a keyframe. Okay, so if I did this here, it's gonna add a keyframe. Okay, so you can also, if you want to delete them or move them around, you can do that. You can play around with the numbers. If you want to do a really accurate stuff, you can change this number specifically. We can also use these arrow tools to jump around between keyframes. This is really handy. And yeah, so let's dig into an actual project. All right. So I'm gonna delete this. All right, so I'm gonna delete our comp. Yep. Goodbye, beautiful red circle. A good thing to do before we actually dig into making our form demo here, it's a good idea to actually just start by saving your file. So I'm gonna go to File, Save As, and I'm gonna navigate to where I'm gonna keep all my stuff. And so for me, I've got a motion class files folder set up, and I'm going to throw, if I was you, I would put all my demo files and project files inside of its own folder. And then within that, we're going to see what we've got. So I've got all the finished reference stuff that I gave you guys, and you're going to save this file in the start folder. Okay, so, and you can see within this folder, we've got our assets that we're going to be importing here in a minute. So inside of the start folder, I'd name it like, for me, JD form demo, and make sure to save that. Okay, and so then when you import, it's going to be in that assets folder. Within that folder, it's pretty much just like InDesign. So anytime that you're basically linking files, so make sure that you keep all your stuff together. We could technically move this folder around somewhere else if we wanted to. We could move this folder around if we wanted to, but if we start moving this file around or these assets around, you're going to have some problems. So make sure to keep everything grouped like this, okay? So let's get back into it. All right, so I want to go ahead and grab the Illustrator file that we have ready. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and File. All right, and so you can import all kinds of stuff. Today we're importing an Illustrator file, okay? So since I have my layers set up all nice, this is going to be really easy. If I just hit open on it, and it's going to give you a couple options. If you do footage, it's going to merge the layers, which isn't going to be good, okay? So everything comes in as one big thing, and we don't want that because we want to animate the pieces. So to animate the pieces, I'm going to undo that. We've got to import file, and then grab it and do composition is what we want. Okay, so it's going to automatically make a composition for us. And for the footage dimensions, so footage is like the individual pieces. Okay, so you can either set the footage, which means like each layer, to be the size of the layer itself, or the size of the document. So our document's set up by 1920 by 1080. I'll show you what this looks like. I'll undo it. If you do document size, basically, and we double click our composition, it's going to open up down here. What happens is like, see this, these are all our layers. I'm going to hit the eyeball. So for this F lines -4 layer, you can see that it actually thinks that the size of this element is the size of the whole composition. Now, the only reason why this isn't great is just because our anchor points are all messed up. So we would have to manually go in for each element and kind of move this anchor point where we wanted it to. If we were doing, especially like scale and rotation changes, that starts to matter a lot more. So I'm gonna just get rid of all this stuff. Delete. And I'm gonna import file, get our Illustrator file, open, and we're going to do layer size. And so basically, I'm just going to click through these really quick. You can see that now our layers are actually just the size of the element that we want, which is good. And our composition, if we go into composition settings, it just remembered what we made before. So it knew that we were at 1920 by 1080, 24 frames a second, 3-second duration. So it just made a composition based on what we had. Which is what we want. So that works out. But you can change this stuff. If we want it to be longer or shorter or different frame rate, you can change that stuff in composition settings at any time. So, all right. So to animate this stuff, so now you can see our layer size is actually correct and our anchor points are set up much better for what we're gonna want to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and just click these eyeballs. This is just too much stuff to look at. So I'm going to shift click on all these layers, and if you hit the eyeball on those, it'll turn them all off, which is kind of nice. All right, so to start off, I think what we want to do is have our vertical one kind of come up. And so I'm just going to start off just looking at this one actually. Let's turn these off too, just to get focused here. I'm going to zoom in, and what we need is, so if we want, what we want to end up doing is scaling this up vertically. Okay, so we want this to kind of like grow up. So to do that right now, I'm going to toggle this down and look at our scale. So right now, if I change the scale, it's locked together. Okay, so we actually want to only change the vertical scale of it, so I'm going to unlock those. And so now we can affect that. But what I don't like is that the transformation point is in the middle. So what we need to do is use our pan behind tool to actually change it to the bottom. And if you hold Command, it'll snap into place, which is pretty cool. So now that's all set up nice and perfect. One thing I do want to show you guys really quick that I'm going to be starting to do is using key commands to access our transform stuff. So I'm going to show them all the most important ones to you right now. So T is opacity, so think like transparency. P is for position. R is for rotation. And what else? I forget what the other one. Oh, scale. Derp. All right, scale. And you can, if you hold Shift and do T, P, R, you can bring them all up and you can take away the ones that you don't want. Okay, that's super, super handy. I know learning key commands isn't fun, but that's a good one to do. And so what I want to have happen is, let's say we want a 5-frame animation. Okay, a lot of this stuff is like working backwards, right? We've got all of our elements in place where we want them, so we know that this is where we want it to end up. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the stopwatch to add a keyframe. Okay, and now I'm going to take my playhead and say, okay, well, I actually want at the start of the animation, I want this thing to be 0. Okay, so you can either click and drag or you can type in 0. Okay, I'm just going to type that in. And so now let's see. So right now if I hit play, our work area is too big. It would take 3 seconds to play the whole thing. I'm going to move my work area so that we can just see this one individual thing. Now that's looking a little too fast. All right, don't freak out if this happens. All you got to do is just click your playhead. So that was a little too fast. I think we need a couple more frames. So I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag this keyframe. Let's just take a look. Now I want this to be quick, but that was a little too quick. This is looking a little bit better. I mean, each frame really matters, right? So make sure to pay attention to that timing. Now, after this thing grows, I want the other one to rotate out. And I'm going to go ahead and hit our eyeball here. And so we're going to definitely do the rotation on this sucker. So I'm going to hit R. And since I kind of want this to like swing out from this side, so if we were rotating it now, you know, we need to move our transform point. So I'm going to go ahead and use our pan behind tool and hold Command to get that anchor point over there. Okay. Let's see. I wonder if it would be better up here. Yeah. I think that would be pretty cool. So what I don't want to have happen, I don't want to see it at all. So I think what I'm going to do, let's see. Well, let's say for now, let me think about this. All right, so we want this sucker to swing out, but we also don't really want to see it on that side. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit, let's just make a keyframe here for a rotation. And I'm going to go back a couple frames. And we're going to just have it go like that. All right, so I'm about 86 degrees right now. But we want it to start happening kind of after this happens. So you can select all your keyframes. So I'm just clicking and dragging. And so we want to make sure that that bar is up, at least for the most part. All right. So I think what I want to have, I want it to kind of like just appear right there. So this is going to happen pretty quick. So what you can do is you can either click and drag this in. And so what that means is that it's not going to be visible anywhere before it. So once we get to there, it's going to happen. And I think this might need to happen a little. Let's just hit play and see how that looks. That looks pretty good, actually. All right, I'm kind of liking that timing. Yeah, that's all all working pretty good. Okay, so now we've got that done. I also want to animate our lines next. So if we turn on these eyeballs, okay, cool. You can shift click layers to select multiple. Okay, and if you hit command, you can, pick, individual ones. If this ever happens, it just opens this up in its own little window, and you can just hit the X, okay? So what I want to have happen with these is I want them to fade in and move up. So two properties, all right? So that's position and transparency. So opacity, right? And I don't know. I mean, we're going to be getting into this stuff later, but I always do something with position. I'll show you guys for the most part, and it'll come in handy later, but it's good practice to kind of start doing this. So unless you're trying to make some kind of curved animation where it follows like an arc or something, you can leave it together, but I always separate dimensions, especially when I'm doing just straight movements with either X or Y. So X is horizontal movements, Y is vertical movements. So since we only want to animate the Y property, I just separate it. I don't know. You'll see later. It'll make more sense later. But for now, let's go ahead and I'm going to hit a couple things here. So what we want to have happen is we want to have all these things do like the same thing. Okay, so we know that we want it to end up here. So I've selected all these layers. Okay, and when you do that and you hit the keyframe, you've got multiple layers selected. You can see that it added a keyframe on those 4 that I have picked, which is pretty cool. And let's say we want this to take about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. Okay, and we can adjust when this stuff comes in just a second here. But what I want to have happen, I still have all these layers selected. And what's cool is that if we want them to all kind of move the same, let's say we want it to move about that much. Okay, so I just had them all selected. It automatically added keyframes. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, but see now it's all together. And what I also want to have happen is I want the opacity to change. So I still have all these layers selected. I'm going to go to the last keyframe and I can just use these to navigate. Okay, so I want to, at the last keyframe, I want to make sure that my opacity is checked. I want to go back to my first keyframe, so I'm jumping around here. And I want these to fade in. Okay, so I'm just going to type in 0. So now when I play this, okay, so they're all coming up at once. All right, so I wanted the space between them and the opacity stuff, I wanted that to happen to all of them, but what I want to have happen is actually, I want the first line, I'm going to click off and click on, I want this first line to come up first. So what you can do is just offset the keyframes. Okay, so what you do is you can either pick the whole layer. And so if I click and drag, nothing really happens. This is going to come into play later. This is especially with like video footage. You can like scrub through different stuff. But if I just click and drag it, it doesn't do anything like that. I have to hold the Alt Option key. Okay. If I hold Alt Option, I can click and drag this over. Okay. So that's one way to do it. Another thing that you could do instead is just select your keyframes and move them over a frame. But you'll see what we're doing here. So that's 2 ways of doing it. And either one is totally fine because our opacity is 0, so anything before we're not going to see it anyways. I'm just going to go ahead and, I don't know, I'm just going to move the keyframes. So I'm going to move this keyframe like that, and so that's the second line I want to happen. Basically what you want to have happen is the first line does it, second line does it, third line does the animation, fourth line does the animation, all with a little bit of offset, okay? So I'm going to just click this one over and I want to be the next frame after this one. And I want the fourth line to happen last, so I'm going to move these keyframes over here. Okay. And so I'm going to extend my work area just a little bit and I'm going to hit play. There you go. All right. So that's looking pretty good. I don't know, maybe these should happen just a little bit later. So we could either select all the keyframes, or I'll do what I was showing you guys before too. Let's see, I'm going to select, I'm just going to click off, select this layer, select this layer, select this layer, select this layer. All right, and so I'm going to hold that Alt Option key and just, I want this all just to happen just a touch later. Cool. There we go. Okay, so that's our F, and we're going to keep on moving on to the O now. So I'm going to turn on these layers. And since I know that I want, so it's always good that things always kind of overlap each other. So just when this is about to be, that top bar is about to be done, the other one starts. You never really want any moments of like time between each thing ending and the next thing starting. You want them to kind of overlap a little bit. So when we animate this O, I kind of want it to start right around here where this is still kind of happening. So I'm going to hold Alt Option and click and drag these over. And there we go. So now we turn on that eyeball. Right now, you know, it just pops on screen right there. But what we want to have happen is we want these circles to kind of scale up. And so I think we want to do, let's just get them all at the same time. So I'm going to hit S to pop open that drop down for all three of these. And I'm going to move my playhead. Let's see. If you hold Command and hit the arrow keys, it moves the playhead by frames. So I'm going to just hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to say it's about a 6 frame animation. And I'm going to hit the stopwatch to add keyframes. And I'm going to go back to this. And I mean, basically we just want these things to scale up. So I'm just going to keep all that, hit 0, and it's going to change all those. Okay, now we don't want these to happen at the same time. So we want our, let's say we want our big circle to happen first. And then we want our little circle to happen next. And we want this to happen a little bit later. So I just drag those over. Okay, there we go. Ooh, that's kind of fun. All right, so let's see how that looks. I'm going to move my work area. Hit play. All right, not too shabby. Now, let's go ahead and move on to our R. And okay, so just like last time, let's move these. So just maybe about here is feeling good. So this is still going on. We want our R to start animating. So I'm just holding Alt Option, moving this over. And, you know, just gotta, let's see. I want our top line to be the first thing that comes on. So I'm going to turn these eyeballs off. I'm going to keep the circle on for just a second here. So what I want to have happen is I want this piece to kind of like start down here. I want it to move up and then swing over. So what I'm going to do is first, I know that I'm going to end up wanting this as the rotation point. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this using the pan behind tool and just positioning it right there. Just so that when we rotate it, I'm going to hit R. And so that way that's kind of like the transformation point. I think it'll look kind of cool. All right, so what we want to have happen. So we're going to be changing position, rotation, and maybe even a little opacity. So three things, okay? So what I'm going to do is, just to get us going here, I'm just going to throw in keyframes for these 3 properties. And because we know that this is where we want it to end up. All right, and I'm going to work backwards. All right, so from there, I think the rotation should take about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll try 6. That's kind of what we've been doing. Staying consistent with, you know, you don't want one thing to take a really long time and another thing to take not so much, you know. So we're trying to be consistent with this one. And I'm just going to rotate it. We want to make sure that we're actually minus 90 is what we want. And I think that's going to be cool. Okay. So what we want to have happen is this happens, but before that we want to start lower. So I'm going to move this all over. I'm going to select all these keyframes and move these over. And so actually we want, once this rotation starts, this stuff already has to be there. So I'm going to move these keyframes over. Okay. So I'm just clicking and dragging those because we want this position to be there once this stuff starts to happen. So I did that. Now what I want to have happen, let's see, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6-ish, we'll say. What you want to have happen is I'm going to move this down now, okay? And I should have split them, but I didn't split them. I could still do that. I could still separate since we're only moving the X and Y. And we don't need anything to change on X, so I'm just gonna hit that. If you hit the stopwatch after stuff's already been added, it deletes all the keyframes, so just keep an eye on that. Undo is always your friend, right? Command Z. So, all right, what I wanna have happen is, I wanna make sure that I'm staying kind of consistent with this. So I'm gonna hit Command R to bring up rulers. And I'm just going to bring down this one guy just to make sure that we're at least, you know, somewhat respecting our nice little setup here. So I'm going to move this down to that line. And I'm going to pick my move tool and I'm going to get rid of this thing so we don't have to look at it anymore. Okay, so I know I'm good there. I also want it to change opacity. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that to 0. And for now, I'm going to turn off the circle. Let's take a look and see what we got. All right, that's feeling pretty cool. All right. So once this comes up, we want our, let's do our, I don't know, let's try our lines. Let's do our lines again. I'm going to turn all those on. Okay, and just like last time, we kind of want to do the same thing. So on all these lines, I'm just going to go ahead and hit position and transparency, opacity, right? I'm going to select all these and split them so that we can just animate our Y property. All right. So let's go ahead and just select all these. And we're going to add a keyframe on all the Ys. So, oops. Why did it do that? I'm going to undo. I think you have to, maybe you actually have to pick the property. Yeah, shift and click on each of those. And there we go. Okay, so we've got our final position. We're working backwards again. I'm going to go back in time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to lower all of these. And you can kind of just eyeball that to a level that you feel good with. That's looking pretty good. And I'm going to use our little carrots to jump around so that we can change the opacity. So I'm going to hit a keyframe for opacity, jump back, and hit 0. Okay. Cool. So we do want these to kind of be offset again. So we want our top one. If you ever need to deselect, just kind of click in an empty area on the timeline. There we go. Cool. So this is the one that we want to happen first. So we need to move all of these kind of sequentially. All right. So we want this one to be a little longer. We want this one to happen next. We want this one to happen after that one. Let's make sure, yep. And we want this one to happen after this one. Now, another thing that you can do if you want to get real specific, make sure that you play around. See these little mountains? You can zoom in and out on your timeline. Okay, so sometimes it's really handy to be able to see where each frame is happening. And there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and see what we're working with here. Okay, it's happening too soon right now, so we want to make sure that you know, I don't want this to happen at the same time. I want this to I want to start right around there. So I'm going to go ahead and let's pick all of our layers. So I'm just going to shift click, grab all those, hold an Alt Option, and let's scoot them over this way. Maybe not quite that much. Okay, let's see how this looks. Okay, it's feeling a little better. And we've got a couple more pieces to play with here. Top circle. That's just the little, I think the little tiny dude in here. Let's do that one. So let's just do scale on this one. And let's say maybe we want it to happen, I don't know, maybe this happens right when this kind of locks into place. So I'm just going to hit scale keyframe, and I'm just going to click and drag that over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a small object, so the animation should probably happen faster. So it needs less timing, and so that way it's only going to have a few frames to just kind of pop up real quick. Cool. And then we want our little lower right thing. There it is. I think, maybe let's just swing that out, or what should we do? Just thinking here. Maybe this just kind of shoots down. Yeah, let's just have it shoot down. So I'm going to hit position, and let's just do I'm going to split them because it's probably just going to be just a Y transformation here. Oops, what did I do? There we go. And so since we know we want to end up here, and let's say we want to take about 6 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's move this up. And let's do the X2. Why not? Let's get crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe on there and move this over. Oops, it's peeking up back there. Let's just move it like right here. And so, yeah, I think that'll work. Now you can see this little corner hiding right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it just show up right there. And so what you can do is you can just click and drag this in. Okay, and so that way this is the first frame. Did I change the wrong one? Oh yeah, these are the lines. Oops. Where's our... There, this is the one that I wanted to change. Derp. There we go. So now, there. It's going to just like shoot out like that. Okay. Let's hit play. Give ourselves a little extra time. Cool. I don't know if I like it happening at the same time. I think I want to offset that a little bit. I don't know if I like that. All right, so yeah, I'm not liking the way it's just kind of moving down like that. I kind of want to like swing out or do something a little more interesting. So what I think I'm going to do, let's move I want to like rotate and kind of shoot down. So I'm going to move our anchor point. This is probably going to mess up everything, but we'll figure it out. So I moved my anchor point when I was on this frame. Okay, and I would suggest making sure that you do that. I think if you move it at a different frame, bad things might happen. But so this is cool now. All right, so it's right here. We'll adjust all this stuff, and I want it to rotate. So I'm going to bring up my rotation properties, and I'm going to hit a keyframe there. And at the beginning, I want this thing to be like swinging out. And I don't want it to be that high. So let's go ahead and move our Y position. So this is changing the keyframe, but this is what we should have done from the beginning. There we go. And maybe our X value scooches over like this. About there. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if I like that either. I think maybe we just don't want our X value or Y value to change, and it's just rotation. So let's just get rid of these for now. You can always change it later. And yeah, let's just rotate it. That's looking pretty cool. So what we can have happen is, let's have it fade in too. So let's do opacity. I mean, because if you don't like something, you got to change it, right? I mean, you don't want to live with this and hate it forever. Okay, so that's feeling pretty good. Okay, cool. That's feeling a little better. I'm going to add a little time on here just to make sure. Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and I liked how that was working together. This feels like a nice little transition between the O and the R. Timing's feeling pretty good. Now we just need to do the M. So let's go ahead and turn all these on. Oops. Select them all, eyeball on. And we want this animation to happen while this one's still kind of finishing up. So I'm going to hold Alt Option, drag this over. Okay, let's turn off the lines for now. And even the top one. Okay. So what I want to have happen is I want the left one to kind of grow from the bottom. So I'm going to move this anchor point down there. And I want our middle line to move the top. So let's do the left one first, scale. And I'm going to unlock these things. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish. Add a little keyframe there. And we're going to change the scale 0. And so that's going to grow like that. That feels a little, I think that's going to be a little quick. You can kind of see how many frames there are, and I think we need a couple more just because it's a longer element. So otherwise it's just a little too quick. Okay, so let's see. See that? I'm going to turn off the middle one for now. There we go. Okay. Now that's happening. We want our middle one to do something kind of similar. So let's count these frames out real quick. So we can just animate it from following this guide, right? So we're going to add a keyframe there, and we know that we want it to take the same amount of time, so we're just going to use that spacing, and we want this one to be 0. Okay, but we want it to happen a little bit later. So let's go ahead and move this over a few frames, like maybe right there. Okay. And we also want the top to come in. That's just going to scale from, let's do 0 that way. So let's use our tool over here. Okay. And we're going to scale this one too. So scale, and we're going to say unlock these 0. Okay. There we go. It's kind of cool. And now for our final element, our lines, let's do position and transparency. And I think I want these to kind of start on the right side and move to the left. So let's do our XY split here, separate dimensions. And I'm going to add a keyframe for our X position. And let's go ahead and move, oh, I did both. Let's just select just X. Add a keyframe, move this over a few, and shift these all over. We also know that we want transparency, so we're going to go ahead and click that and 0 that out. Okay, and now we need to offset these, because otherwise they just move in a group, right? And that's lame. So this is our one that we want to happen first. This happens next. This happens after that one, and this happens last. Okay. Let's check it out. It's feeling pretty good. All right. So I'm going to zoom out and just watch this a couple more times. Yeah, it's feeling good. Okay, so we've got our form demo finished up, and now we actually need to get this out of After Effects. So we can't do anything really with our After Effects file. It's a working file. We need to create a video file. And we're going to do that by going to Composition, and then there's some options here. For us, we want to make something called an H.264. That's the most common video file format that we're looking for uploading to YouTube. So we're going to go to Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. And that's going to take a minute to fire up. Adobe actually just updated fairly recently how you export videos, and it's using Adobe Media Encoder. So that's a actual separate program that opens up, and you can see it bouncing around down here. And all it is it just converts video files. That's its whole purpose. So give it a minute, be patient, especially if it's the first time it's starting up. It's going to take a little bit. But then once it's up, you're going to see something that looks like this, and then they make you wait longer, and then this shows up here. Okay, so try to be a little patient with it. If you drop down this list, you're going to see a whole bunch of different things. These are all different kinds of file formats that you could export or convert in Adobe Media Encoder. We want H.264, and we're going to select the preset 1080p HD. And then if you click on these blue words over here, this is where it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in here, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to name it JD Form Demo Finished, or something like whatever you guys want to name it. And I'm going to save it, and then you just hit play. All right, so that's all you have to do to get your file out of there. And it shouldn't take too long. All right, and so then once you have that, we'll go over uploading in a separate video.